never regain. Stuck in a losing game, we pass the blame. Cycle starts again, we break with a chance to remake. It's up of our mistakes. We follow the lead, but it leads to nothing when nothing is left to claim. We fell addicted to fame and promise of grandeur, but promises never stain. They say you can only get better from here. They say there's plenty more to go. All the answers turn to words that disengage. A will surrenders, letting our future start to fade away. All the answers turn to words that rearrange. I'm caught in the sunset, taking a last breath as we fade away.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of the Restoring the Roar show on the NSD Network. I am your host, Alex Loosemore. I was about to say the NFL edition. That's tomorrow. We are here to talk Lions tonight on Restoring the Roar, brought to you by Zagnif Apparel. Thank you again to Zagnif Apparel for the partnership. Stuff we're going to talk about tonight. The typical stuff on the last few shows, the takeaways from this past week's game, game balls, grading the keys to victory I had versus the Packers, and new keys to victory versus the Panthers, and then a prediction going into Carolina. I just realized I didn't do the prediction part here, so I'll just come up with one on the fly here. I was getting everything else ready because the other key part I'm going to talk tonight, and I'm actually going to start off with it, is I'm going to highlight just how good this defense has been through the first 4 games this year, going to compare it to last year's defense through the first 4 games, which we all know how awful it was. I'm going to compare it to that defense as well as some of the top defenses in the NFL today. Looked at a bunch of defenses to compare. Some of the ones the list that I've kind of used to compare here: Cleveland, San Francisco, Buffalo, Tampa, the Jets, the Eagles, the Steelers, and the Cowboys. So, most of the top defenses, some kind of middle defenses there. Just wanted to kind of give an overall picture of how good this Lions defense is playing right now, because to a lot of people, it's probably under the radar. So I'll start off with that. So just how good has this defense been? I'll compare it to last year's defense first before comparing it to the other ones this year. So in total yards allowed, so the opponents last year, we were home against Philly, home against Washington, at Minnesota, and home versus Seattle. This year we were at Kansas City, home versus Seattle. We were obviously at Green Bay last week and home versus Atlanta in week 3. So I would say this year's schedule was tougher in the first 4 games. Total yards allowed last year. 1,779 yards of total offense allowed for an average of 444.75 yards per game. Last year. This year, total yards allowed 1,122, which is fourth most in the NFL right now. And per game, that works out to 280.5 yards per game. So a difference there of 164.25 yards per game, which is quite a bit. The passing yards allowed last year through 4 games, 1,117. So almost as many total yards allowed this year as we had just passing yards last year. Passing yards allowed this year, 879. So almost 300 yards fewer total than last year through the air. This is the massive difference here, though. Rushing yards allowed last year through 4 games, 662. So an average of 165.5. Rushing yards allowed this year total is 243. So we had 165 per game last year, 243 through 4 games. I'm going to turn this light off here. I just realized it's messing with the background there. Yeah, that is a massive difference. And the main reason this defense has been so much better. Rushing yards allowed, we're first in the NFL right now. So that is a massive, massive jump from being one of the worst defenses historically in NFL history to being one of the better defenses in the NFL right now. As far as we go today, I've got a whole bunch of different stats here. So the show is going to be a bit longer probably than the other ones, but that's okay because we can go more than half an hour here. The points allowed through 4 games, 83. So 13th in the NFL. 42 behind first place, which is Dallas. And 6 behind 10th place, which is Atlanta. Of all the defenses that I listed that we're comparing the Lions to here, the only one we're ahead of is Philly. San Fran, Buffalo, Tampa, the Jets, and the Steelers all have allowed fewer points, I believe. Yeah, and Dallas, obviously. Dallas being first place. And Cleveland is the other one. Yards allowed total, like I said, we're 4th. Can you go all night? I'm referring to the show, by the way. Thank you for tuning in, Ben. I don't know that I'll be able to go that long. I don't have quite enough stats here for that. But probably closer to a 45-minute show tonight would be my guess. Yeah, what's up, Sean? Hope you're doing well. Thank you for tuning in. Just going through right now and comparing Lions defense to some of the top defenses in the NFL. And Aiden is the truth. He's playing so damn well right now. As a Michigan guy and a Lions guy, I'm so happy to see that. But he is really spearheading a really good defensive line right now for Detroit. And it was one where we were all saying they need pieces, and we didn't really do anything to that defensive line. And it's showing up this year. They're playing very well. Very happy to see it. Yeah, yards allowed, 1,122 is 4th place in the NFL. We're 335 behind first place, which is Cleveland. Cleveland, yardage-wise, is insane defensively right now. But as far as all those defenses I listed that we're comparing to, the 1,122 yards is better than San Fran, Buffalo, Tampa, the Jets, Philly, and Pittsburgh. So Dallas, Baltimore. I don't know if I said Baltimore is one of the ones I'm comparing to. Also comparing to Baltimore. Dallas, Baltimore, and Cleveland are the ones that jump ahead of Detroit here. And they're the only 3 defenses better in yards allowed right now. Any update on Brian Branch? So it's just an ankle injury. So sounds like he sprained it. He might be good to go this week. Having those extra 3 days might really help here. We'll see if he's good to go for Sunday. We didn't practice today, so it was all just the assumed designation. So they designated him as no practice today. But we'll see if he shows up on the injury report tomorrow. Well, he'll show up, but we'll see where he's actually listed, how much he participates in practice tomorrow. Yards per play allowed is 4.5 yards per play, tied for third with San Francisco, 0.7 yards per play behind the only other two teams ahead of Detroit and San Fran, which is Cleveland and Baltimore. There's a reason I clumped most of these defenses into this comparison. But yeah, Detroit has fewer yards per play allowed than Dallas, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Tampa, Philly, and the Jets, amongst the other defenses in the NFL. This is one Detroit is falling behind the rest of them in. Turnovers. We only have 4. It's tied for 20th. Obviously, like I did, like if there's 5 for first, then actually second would be 6th, and so on. So Detroit is tied for 20th with Tennessee, Atlanta, Green Bay, Carolina. We're 7 turnovers behind first. Buffalo has 11 already to start the year. Very impressive by them. And we're just 2 outside the top 10. Indy, Seattle, the Jets, and New Orleans are all tied for 8th technically with 6. The only defense comparison-wise from that group I listed at the beginning that we're better than in turnovers is Cleveland. I believe Cleveland only has 3. First downs given up. Like I said, I went really into this. First downs given up. We've allowed 76, tied for 14th with, again, San Francisco. 39 first downs given up, more than Cleveland, who's in first place with 37. And 4 behind the top 10, which is a tie between 4 behind entering the top 10, which is a tie between the Rams and the Saints. We've given up fewer first downs than Philly, Pittsburgh, and the Jets. Passing yards allowed, 879, which is 18th in the NFL. Not great. 379 yards behind Cleveland in first place. Like I said before, Cleveland is going nuts with the yardage stats here. They've only allowed 500 yards passing through 4 games, which is wild. Even though we're 18th, we're only 95 yards away from 10th place, which is New England. And we've allowed fewer passing yards than Philly, Tampa, and Pittsburgh. Passing touchdowns allowed. Sean said, love the detail, but let's be honest, I wouldn't expect anything less. I started comparing this defense to last year's defense. And then I was starting to see, like, we're first in rushing yards allowed and 4th in total yards allowed and all that. So I was just like, just how good are we really stacked up against the top defenses? So I wanted to kind of compare, and this is what I did after work today. So passing touchdowns allowed, we've allowed 5, tied for 14th with New Orleans, the Jets, the Titans, the Cardinals, the Colts, and the Seahawks. 3 more touchdowns allowed than first place, which is a tie between Dallas and Houston of all teams. So good job to Houston being up there. And we're just 1 from being tied for the top 10 with Carolina, Kansas City, Green Bay, the New York Giants, San Fran, and Tampa. We've allowed fewer passing touchdowns than Philly and Pittsburgh from that list before. This was an interesting one for me. Net yards per pass attempt. So the passing yards allowed, you take off the sack yards. So we've allowed 5.3 passing yards per attempt once you take off the sack yardage, which is tied for 6th. Apparently I didn't write down who it was with the tie. We're 1.6 yards per attempt behind Baltimore, who's in first. only 0.2 yards per attempt behind fifth place, which is Kansas City. Fewer yards per attempt than Buffalo, Philly, the Jets, Pittsburgh, and Tampa. And here's where it starts to get real good. The rushing yards allowed, only 243, which is good for first place. 9 yards ahead of second place, which is Philly. And then obviously, since we're first place, better than all those defenses that we're comparing to. Yards per carry, we're allowing 3 yards per carry right now, which is second to only Tennessee, who's allowing 2.9 yards per carry. Where are we at here? Blitzes. So we've blitzed the 7th fewest amount of times in the NFL we've only blitzed 31 times. 8 more than Buffalo, who's in first. We've blitzed less than the Jets, Cleveland, San Francisco, Dallas, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Tampa. Hurries, we are 4th in the league with 22. 3 just hear the roommate coughing like crazy there. We have 3 fewer hurries than Philly, who's in first place. 22 hurries, which is good for 4th place in the NFL. We have more hurries than Pittsburgh, the Jets, Tampa, Buffalo, Dallas, Baltimore, and Cleveland. Come back to some of these after. Sacks, we have 13, which is tied for 7th with Pittsburgh. 3 behind first place, which is a tie between Buffalo, Seattle, and the Chargers. Just saw your comment here, Sean. There goes the rips again. Yeah, and on top, I've spread my sickness to them. I'm just getting off fighting a cold. They've now got it. So all that combined, yeah, a lot of coughs in the household right now. 3 behind first place. Buffalo, the Chargers, and Seattle with their 11 sacks on Monday night are tied for first with 16. The Lions have more sacks than Cleveland, Tampa, Philly, San Fran, and the Jets. And obviously, we're tied with Pittsburgh. Buffalo, Baltimore have more, and Dallas as well has more. Total pressures, which is hurries, sacks, and quarterback knockdowns all combined. The Lions have 49, which is tied for second with, oddly enough, the 49ers. And 5 behind first place, which is Philly. Philly has 54. Obviously, with us being second and tied with San Fran, we have more than Pittsburgh, Buffalo, the Jets, Cleveland, Tampa, Baltimore, and Dallas. And then we'll come back to the front of the page here. We have 20 penalties on the defense, which is tied for 5th fewest with Cincinnati. We have 6 more than first place, which is Buffalo. We're also tied with Philly. I forgot I wrote that down below. Philly also has 20 penalties, but we have fewer penalties defensively than Tampa, the Jets, Dallas, Cleveland, San Fran, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh. And for penalty yards, we have 160 penalty yards, so an average of 8 yards per penalty. The yardage is good for 8th fewest yards in the NFL. 34 yards behind first place, which is Philly. Fewer penalty yards than the Jets, Baltimore, San Fran, Dallas, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh. So Tampa has fewer yards than us, even though they have more penalties, which is kind of funny. And then obviously Buffalo, fewer yards, fewer penalties. And then here's some more of those kind of advanced stats. Yards after catch allowed, 346 yards, which is good for 9th in the NFL. 9th fewest, that is. 44 behind first place, which is San Francisco. They've only allowed 302. We have fewer yards after the catch than Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Tampa, the Jets, and Philly. And percentage of drives ending in a score is 33.3%, which is good for 10th in the NFL. 15.7% behind first place, which is Cleveland. They're allowing a score on 17.6% of their drives, which is wild. But we have a lower percentage of drives ending in a score than Tampa, Pittsburgh, and the Jets. The rest of those teams that we're comparing to are inside that top 10. This defense, I'm hesitant to say top 5. I was going to say definitely top 10. But I mean, we're up there in a ton of categories, so yeah, you could argue top 5, absolutely. Just wanted to show how good this defense is, because I know a lot of people are watching Detroit this year, but I don't think that defense is going to get quite enough credit. And my takeaways from that 34-20 victory over Green Bay. My first one is the defense. It showed up again. Some of the stats from that game: we had 5 more sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 6 passes defended, 11 more QB hits, and only 230 total yards allowed. And the majority of that came in the second half. I feel like they were, for most of the first half, they were at negative total, like net yards. And then obviously the third quarter, they started to heat up. They only ended up with 27 rushing yards, 203 passing yards. Again, most of that came in the second half. Actually, most of it was in the third quarter. But this defense owned that Green Bay offense for the majority of that game. Jim said, the Lions remind me of a team that is playing 110% each game. The question is, can you keep that up for 17 games? That is what I'm waiting to see. I'm waiting to see if this defense starts to fall off at some point here. I mean, most of our, like, Kansas City was probably the best offense we're going to face all year. Mind you, they didn't have Travis Kelce. But, I mean, we still got to play Minnesota twice. They've got a good offense, minus the turnovers. Baltimore's got a good offense. I mean, like, there's still some good offenses to go against the rest of the way. I mean, you guys in Tampa, your offense is playing pretty damn good as well. So, yeah, let's wait to see if it kind of starts to fall apart here. The one thing I don't expect to fall apart is this running game, and it was awesome again on Thursday. We had 211 total rushing yards. Montgomery had 32 carries for 121 yards, which he averaged almost 4 yards per carry on 32 carries, which is wild. He also had the 3 rushing touchdowns. Gibbs averaged 5 yards per carry. That should say 8 carries. I was looking at the average yardage when I made this as well. So, yeah, he had 8 carries for 5 yards per carry. Bring that back up now that I fixed it. Khalif Raymond had that jet sweep and around, whatever you want to call it, for 40 yards. And Goff had 10 yards on 2 carries. But when you're getting a rushing attack like Detroit is bringing week in and week out, it makes the defense's job a lot easier because they're not spending as much time on the field. You're limiting possessions of the other team, letting the defense get rest, letting them analyze what they're going against, what the offense has been showing them on the other side, and kind of adjusting that game plan as necessary. I love what this offense is doing, and I expect this rushing attack to keep going as long as the running backs and offensive line stay healthy. My third and final takeaway from the game: Lions own the NFC North right now. And this isn't something I'm just saying because we whooped Green Bay. This is something just based on the past little while here. 4 straight wins against Green Bay. Swept them last year. won the last matchup in 2021, obviously won on Thursday. We swept Chicago last year. They swept us the year before. Mind you, we hadn't won any games up to that point. And we have the one win versus Minnesota. They constantly beat us when we're in Minneapolis. So obviously that one win makes sense. But the big one here is 6 straight wins versus the NFC North. We were 5-1 in the NFC North last year. I predicted us to be 5-1 again this year, with again the loss in Minneapolis. So I expect it to be the same. The one that I thought we might slip up on was at Lambeau, and obviously that didn't happen. So the NFC North is absolutely Detroit's to lose right now. Let's see if they can finish the job and win the NFC North for the first time ever. The last time they won the division, it was still the NFC Central, and I believe it was back in '91, the last time they won a playoff game. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how long they can hold this this hot streak for. The game balls for last Thursday's game. The offense, I went for the offensive line. I went Montgomery at first, and then I saw that of his 121 rushing yards, 77 of those yards came before contact. That is a wild stat. This offensive line killed it. They only allowed 2 sacks as well. The offensive line absolutely dominated Green Bay's front seven. And for me, and for the second time this season, the offensive line gets the game ball for me. Jim said the Lions will probably destroy the Panthers, so they'll be coming to Tampa Bay highly confident, but it won't come as easy against the Bucs. I couldn't agree with you more, Jim. I think the way Carolina's playing right now, I'm not certain who's playing quarterback, whether it's Bryce Young or Andy Dalton. I think it's Bryce Young, but I'm not entirely sure. But that offensive line is not playing well. So I think we'll eat the quarterback alive again. We might come in a little too confident to Tampa. And that's one of those games the rest of the way that worries me. You guys, Baltimore, at Minnesota, and at Dallas are the 4 games that concern me the rest of the way. The rest of them I feel pretty good about. Yeah, offensive line absolutely deserves this game ball. They killed it. They've been killing it. Getting Taylor Decker back and allowing Panay to go back to the right side was a godsend. Decker played really well. Panay played well. Ragnow played freaking awesome. He was so good. I love this offensive line. Me being an offensive lineman for 13 years, I watch these guys a lot more than I actually watch the ball. So it's really nice to see this offensive line play this well and lead the way for guys like Montgomery, Gibbs, and Jared Goff. The defensive game ball goes to Jerry Jacobs, his 2 interceptions. I almost gave this as a unit to the defensive line because all the 5 sacks, the 8 tackles for loss, the 11 QB hits, pretty much all that was the defensive line alone. Liam McNeil was awesome. Aiden Hutchinson was awesome. The rest of the guys like Charles Harris, Romeo Quara, John Kaminsky, they all showed up and they all balled out too. So I just about gave it to them. But those 2 interceptions leaned me towards giving it to Jerry Jacobs. So I went that way with him, but the defensive line was a very close second. And for the first time in a while, the special teams game ball doesn't go to Jack Fox, although it almost did. The main reason I went with Riley Patterson here, didn't miss a kick. He had 10 points scored, so scored half of what Green Bay scored just by himself. Was 2 for 2 on field goals and 4 for 4 on extra points. We didn't use Jack Fox that much. That's why he didn't really get it. But he still had 4 punts for 180 yards, an average of 45 yards per punt. a long of 52 and one inside the 20. But Patterson being perfect when we called on him, he gets my special teams game ball. Going ahead and grading my keys to victory I had for Green Bay on last week's show. My first one was get pressure on Jordan Love, A+. Couldn't have done much better than what they did. 5 sacks, 11 quarterback hits, and that's not including just the other pressures where he had to get rid of the ball or was running for his life. They made Jordan Love's life a living hell in that game. Like I said, this defensive line played phenomenal. Couldn't really have done anything better. A+ for that. Another A+ for a heavy dose of the run. Like I said, we had 211 total rushing yards on 43 carries. That is almost 5 yards per carry as a team. And 43 carries. You can't ask for much more than that when you want a heavy dose of the run. They gave it. And this one, I said play action, take the shots when they're there. We didn't do much of that. We didn't really need to, though. Although the reason it gets a B+ is we still took the shots when we needed it. You look at some of the longest catches of the night for some of these guys. Josh Reynolds had 26 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 24. Laporta had a 35-yard catch. So they got the ball down the field when they needed to, and that's why this is a B+. Just didn't do much of the play action part, so I didn't grade it any higher. For me, keys to victory versus Carolina, I didn't type my first one in because I say it every week, so I didn't feel the need to type it in. Dominate the line of scrimmage. Like I said, I've been a lineman for years. That is my main one. Dominate the line of scrimmage. Typically, that allows you to win the game. Jim said, Jordan Love reminds me of a QB who spends 90% of his energy trying to look like all is cool, but you got to back up the cool guy look with your performance. Absolutely. I don't know. I personally don't think Jordan Love's their guy. I think they should go all in, whether they're high enough in the draft to take one of the quarterbacks, or if I was them, I would trade up. Knowing Green Bay, they probably wouldn't do that, but I think they should restart a quarterback here. You've got Love with an easy out on his contract after this year. They gave him that extra 1 year extension instead of giving him the 5th-year option. I don't think he's the guy. So I think you reset instead of paying him a bunch of money when you're not sure he's the guy. Reset that quarterback window, reset that quarterback contract on the rookie contract. I think that's what they should do personally. I hope they don't do that, though. For me, dominate the line of scrimmage, continue to get pressure on the quarterback, and stop their rushing attack. Now, as far as the game prediction goes, like I said, I didn't type one in. They have the spread at 10 points for the Lions right now. I feel like that's kind of right around where I would have put it. They're allowing 25 to 30 points a game. On average, we'll leave it in the middle and say 28. I'll go ahead and say I'm going to have them cover the spread. And I'll say a 31 to 17 victory. Jim said I can see Lions 51 to 6. I don't think it'll be quite that. To be honest, I don't know that they'll score 17. I'll say 31 to 10. I'll say that. Because we typically give up 1 or 2 drives where there's a big play or whatever and they get a score. So I'll give them 10 points. I'll give them a touchdown and a field goal. But I'll say 31-10. I think we absolutely cover the spread on this. I feel like it's a easier win, although if we're looking towards you guys next week, then it could be a trap game. But I don't think so. I think this is a pretty comfortable win. And this is a revenge game for the Lions. If you remember last year, late in the season when we were trying to lock up that playoff spot, we went to Carolina. They whooped our ass. They ran the ball on us left, right, and center. So here's our turn to repay the favor. I think we will run like crazy on them. And kind of like I said here, those play action, take the deep shots when they're there. We could take a bunch of those, especially if they get Jameson Williams comfortable enough to get him in this week. That was something I forgot to talk about. With them fixing the gambling rules, Jameson Williams is back this week. They're going to ease him in so we won't play too much. But I'd love to see him get in there and just run a few go routes and just see if you can get him going. See if you can get him on a long play or two. That's the one thing in the passing game we're missing right now is that deep threat. Reynolds is kind of that over the middle guy, 15 to 20 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown's your short yardage guy that can take it for big gains, but we don't have that deep threat down the field. Jameson Williams is that guy for us if we can get him going. Jim said you can lose a close one to the Bucs and still have a tremendous season. Yeah, I'm currently looking. So I'm expecting a loss at Baltimore, at Dallas, and at Minnesota, which would put us at 4 losses on the season. And you guys is a toss-up game for me. Oh, and I'm also expecting a loss at the Chargers. So I'm at 5 losses, and you guys are a toss-up. So, yeah, I'd still be happy with 11-6. 10-7 I'd be happy with. I want to win the division. That's my main thing. I don't really care what the record is to get there. I want the division this year, and it looks like it's ours to take. I want to get to that game because that's one where I've gone back and forth with like Andrew, Johnny, a bunch of these guys about that game, and I just wanted to get here so we can talk about it. Jim says I see the Lions going 12-5. That's kind of right around where I am. Like I said, 5-6 wins or 5-6 losses is right around where I'm at. So honestly, 12-5. The Lions, as far back as I can remember, never did better than 11-5. So getting that 12th win would be one of the best seasons in recent history for the Lions. Like I'm talking back into the 90s even, which would be awesome to see. Yeah, that's all I got. I said 45 minutes. We're at 39 now. Close enough. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you like what we're doing here, like, share, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And yeah, we'll catch you next week.